Well, maybe in life, it's hardly easy to win very quickly by getting rich, but not in chess. Which is why, in today's video, I am going to show you some of the funny quick games played by some notable Super GMs and other grandmasters. And I can promise that not only are you going to be entertained, but will also learn some new openings, traps, and tactical shots to try out against your opponents. Okay, let's get started. So in the first game, we'll take a look at the quickest win by the former world chess champion, Garry Kasparov. In this game, Garry Kasparov was playing against a player named Guy West. I guess that's how to pronounce his name. Now, Guy West is an Australian chess player who holds the FIDE title of International Master. And if I'm not mistaken, he is a former Australian chess champion. So Garry Kasparov started with pawn to e4, and then Guy responded with c5, the Sicilian defense. Knight to f3 was played by Garry Kasparov. Then Guy responded with knight to f6, immediately going after the e-pawn. Garry defended it. And after knight c3, Guy responded with pawn to e6, going into the lines of the Khan Sicilian. Then anyways, Kasparov responded with pawn to d4, trying to open up the position. Pawn takes, knight takes, and bishop b4 was played by black, simply pinning the knight on c3 to the king. And not to mention that black is also attacking the pawn on e4. Kasparov responded with pawn to e5, attacking the knight on f6. Knight d5 was played, putting more pressure on the knight on c3, which is pinned to the king. Kasparov unpinned his knight with bishop d2, and well, black took on c3 with his knight, b takes c3, and in this position, black decided to play the third most common move according to the Masters Database, bishop f8. But Kasparov here just developed his light squared bishop. Nothing so special about this move, just a simple development eyeing the h7 pawn in the long term. Pawn to d6 was played by Guy, forcing white to take the pawn on d6 so that black can develop his bishop, which is why white shouldn't take, because he's only going to help black to develop his bishop. And that's why in this position, Kasparov just responded with the move queen e2, so that if black takes, Kasparov can take with the queen. Black then continued with knight d7, and this is where we should pause a little bit. See, whenever you see the queen's knight blocking the bishop on c8 in the Sicilian defense, it's high time you start thinking of some tactical shots involving the e6 pawn. And this is what Garry Kasparov demonstrated in this position. Knight takes on e6, a common sacrifice. Now wait a second. This looks like black can just take that knight, but that fails due to queen h5 check. And it doesn't matter what black does, the game is almost over. Because let's say after pawn to g6 blocking the check, here Kasparov would have just continued with bishop takes on g6 check, and after h takes on g6, queen takes on g6 check, king e7, bishop g5 check is winning because black only has to play knight f6 blocking the check, and after queen takes on f6 with check, black's queen is dead. And even if we go back a few moves, let's say after f takes e6, queen h5 check, instead of pawn to g6, king e7 doesn't work either. Because if black plays king e7, there's bishop g5 check, knight f6 the only move, pawn takes the knight with check. And please note that if king d7, we have f takes on g7, indirectly attacking the queen on d8, and also intending to promote into a bazooka if we want. Which is why black will be forced to take with a pawn, and after bishop takes on f6 with check, intending to win black's queen on d8, king takes on f6, and the game is simply over after queen h4 check, laser beaming the queen on d8. And this is the reason why in the actual game that we are analyzing, after knight takes on e6, black played queen b6. And please note that this is just the 11th move of the game, and Kasparov unleashed another evil move, knight c7 check, and black resigned. Technically speaking, the game just ended in 11 moves. Oh no, Kaspar, why resigning? Black can just take the knight. Yes, that's what Kasparov wanted. If queen takes on c7, he would have taken on d6, which comes with open check and an indirect attack on black's queen. Oh, wait a second. Instead of taking on c7, what if the king just goes to d8? Well, we'll just take the rook on a8 and create an attack on the queen. By the way, there will be a way to rescue our knight. And please you guys, before I continue, don't just watch this video, please consider subscribing to my channel because that encourages me to keep on making more wonderful videos just like this one. And also hit the like button, leave your comments in the comment section down below, and you guys please don't forget to check out my website. The link is in the description down below where you can purchase all my courses at very affordable prices with just 1 or 2 clicks. What more can I say? Well, let's get back into the video. So before I show you another game, question is, how did Kasparov find knight takes on e6 on move number 11? Well, I'm sure that he just remembered a similar tactical shot in the Sicilian defense which goes like this. For the sake of your learning, let me show you. So the game still begins as a normal Sicilian defense, and after knight f6, knight c3, black usually plays pawn to d6 in the style of the Najov, after which some strong players respond with bishop c4, just eyeballing the weak f7 pawn. And in this position, you will see black players responding with pawn to e6, covering the f7 pawn, and here white just continues normally with d4, and after pawn takes, knight bd7 is what most modern players play, planning to plant this knight on b6 to put more pressure on white's light squared bishop, so that if bishop b3, a5 is coming and eventually black will play a4. And this is where most white players play bishop g5, just pinning the knight on f6 to the queen. And in this position, believe it or not, when you check the Lichess database, bishop e7 is by far the most played move. And right here is where we usually look for tactics involving the e6 pawn, since black's light squared bishop is blocked by the queen's knight. And that's why in this position we play bishop takes on e6. This is a common tactic in the Sicilian defense. The idea is that after f takes on e6, we take back with the knight, attacking the queen. So black has to play queen b6, after which we take the pawn on g7 again with check, emerging with a better position and 3 pawns at the cost of a piece. So clearly you can see that knight takes e6 on move 11 in the Kasparov game is the best example of playing by intuition. Okay, let's go to the next game. In this game, I am analyzing a famous match between Richard Reti versus Tatarkov in the year 1910 in Vienna, where Reti delivered a mate in just 11 moves against Tatarkov, and since then, the mating pattern gets the name Reti's mate in honor of Richard Reti and this game. And so the game started with pawn to e4, and black responded with a Carlsen defense pawn to c6. Reti still continued with pawn to d4, and black played pawn to d5. Knight c3, d takes e4, and knight takes e4. Then black played knight f6, which is known as the Tatarkov variation, which was actually named after Tatarkov himself, the black player in this game. The most common move here by white is knight takes on f6, but queen d3 was played by Reti. And by the way, if you want to learn more about the Tatarkov variation, you can check out my Carlsen course, suitable for beginners and intermediate level players, which is presented in a layman's language, very easy to understand. Anyways, okay, so when you look at the Masters database here, the most common moves are knight bd7, queen d5, and knight takes on e4. But here Tatarkov surprised his opponent with pawn to e5. With e5, black's plan is to pin white's knight on e4 plus developing his pieces tactically. And that's what happened. After d takes e5, black played queen f5 check. The idea is just to win back the pawn plus pinning the knight to the king. So after bishop d2, queen takes e5, pinning the knight, Reti just castled long, giving up his knight on e4, which his opponent gladly took without wasting any time. And please note that this is only the 8th move of the game, and right here is where Reti played an evil move that shook his opponent's eyeballs. And well, I'm giving you 4 seconds to find the best move in this position. Well, if at all you didn't find queen d8, then I would advise that you focus on marriage or simply getting married and quit chess. Oh, never mind, I'm just kidding. Queen d8 check is what Reti played, and his opponent technically resigned. Well, even though he decided to play a desperado move, king takes on d8, which is the only move, there was no way to save the game after bishop g5, double check. The king can't go back to e8 because there is rook d8 checkmate, which is also what happens after king c7 because there is bishop d8 checkmate. Anyways, let's move on to the next game. Now here we are looking at the game between Biwo versus Orestes Rodriguez, an international grandmaster, and this was played at the San Antonio event in 1979. Well, if I'm not mistaken, Biwo, the white player in this game, is currently an American national master, and this time he is more of a chess scholar, author, and instructor. On the other hand, GM Orestes Rodriguez is a Peruvian grandmaster who has been representing Spain since 1982. Not to mention that he is a 5-time Peruvian chess championship winner. His current rating according to the FIDE website is 2361. So Bill started with pawn to e4, and then GM Rodriguez responded with pawn to e5. Knight f3 attacking the pawn. Knight c6, normal moves. Bishop c4, the Italian game. Knight f6, and now this is officially the two knights defense. Please note that there are quite a number of moves that white can play here. For example, d3, c3, and knight g5, which is known as the fried liver attack. But instead, white played pawn to d4, which is my favorite, by the way. This is a more forcing move, which leaves black with some questions to answer before continuing with his own plans. So e takes d4 is what was played in the game, and here white just castled, leaving his pawn on e4 undefended. And believe you me, this is still playable even at the top level, because if, for example, if knight takes e4, see what would have happened. Knight takes e4, white usually plays rook e1, pinning the knight to the king, and after pawn to d5, holding on to the knight, white can just go on and take the pawn on d5, and after queen takes on d5, there is this sneaky move, knight c3, which attacks both the queen and the knight on e4. Not to mention that black cannot take this knight because the queen will be hanging, which is why you won't see most advanced players taking on e4 with their knight. By the way, instead of pawn to d5 on move 6, pawn to f5 doesn't work either, because that just opens up the way for our light squared bishop and also creates many light squares weaknesses. And that is also why in the game that we are analyzing, pawn to h6 was played instead of knight takes. So remember that white just castled short. So here GM Rodriguez just played pawn to h6, stopping knight g5. And here, the best move was supposed to be pawn to e4 according to Stockfish, but Bill wanted to play a novelty in an effort to trick his opponent psychologically, and it worked. Knight h4, leaving his pawn on e4 hanging. And surprisingly enough, knight takes e4 is again the top played move in this position according to the Lichess database, which is what even GM Rodriguez played. Knight takes e4. Now, instead of what Bill played on the next move, which was queen h5, a candidate move, he should have considered playing bishop takes on f7, which was a more forcing move to end the game in style. But queen h5 was played anyways. And here the GM blundered with pawn to g6 in an effort to chase white's queen away. Otherwise, queen f6 was the correct move to gain back a small advantage. g6 was played, and please note that this is just the 7th move of the game, and white sacrificed on f7 check. Note that if king e7, white can play queen d5 followed by knight g6 ideas. Not to mention that after queen d5, the knight on e4 is also under attack, which is why the grandmaster here just took on f7, and the game ended very quickly after knight f5 checkmate, because the king has got no any safe square to go. This game ended in exactly 10 moves, and this time I think Bill was not even a titled player by then. Anyways, let's move on. The next game we are looking at was played by none other than Vishy Anand versus some unknown player, but you can still look it up and provide the name in the comment section down below. Anyways, the game was played in 1993. And well, Vichy started with pawn to e4, his opponent started with a Sicilian. Knight c3 was played, knight c6, just normal stuffs. By the way, this is the closed Sicilian, so nothing too fancy here. And knight e2 is what most advanced players play here. I mean, the idea is just to play f4 at some point, g3, fianchetto the bishop and castle shot in the style of the Grand Prix. And while anticipating the move pawn to f4, black quickly played pawn to e5, but that only left the d5 square weak, which is why Anand quickly played knight d5, and after knight e7, somehow attacking the knight, Vichy Anand reinforced with knight ec3, adding a defender, and here black played pawn to a6, which is a common move in this position, just simply intending to build up a pawn chain on the queen side with b5, pawn to c4. But in this position, Vichy just simply played pawn to f4, stopping the b5 idea. This is still playable even at the top level, and it was in this position where black just played pawn to g6, intending to go bishop g7 next, but forgetting that knight f6 is simply game over. Now, this is not how you want your games to be ending, so never make such mistakes in chess. Make sure to be patient before playing experimental moves. Anyways, let's go to the next game. Now, in this last part, we are looking at the game between Magnus Carlsen, who was rated 2881 at the time, versus Fabiano Caruana, who was rated 2791, played in the year 2014 in Norway. Now, this was a very embarrassing game, so to speak. Not to say I hate Caruana, but, well, I don't know, maybe he was just tired. The game started as a d4 opening. Pawn to e6 is what Caruana played, which is called the Howie's defense. Here, white can either play pawn to c4, keeping everything in the spirit of the Queen's Gambit declined, or switch back to pawn to e4 and transpose back into the French defense, which is what Magnus did here, pawn to e4, and now it's officially the French defense normal variation. Here, Fabiano continued with pawn to d5, and Magnus played knight d2, entering into the Tarrasch variation of the French defense, or the Rubinstein as it is called. c5 was played, knight gf3 was played by Magnus, c takes d4, knight takes d4. I mean, all these are just common moves, there are no tricks here. Now in this position, black should not take on e4 because that will just help white to develop his queen's knight, which is why rather than taking, Caruana just developed his king's knight to f6. e takes d5 was played by Magnus to open up the position, queen takes d5, and theory here says white should go knight b5, intending to give a check on c7 to create this triple fork, which is why Caruana played knight a6, still common at the top level, and Magnus here simply retreated his knight back to c3, attacking black's queen. Caruana still played a normal move, queen d8, again which is mostly played, and here in anticipation of bishop b4, Magnus played pawn to a3, stopping that, bishop e7, and please note that this is only the 9th move of the game, and Magnus played queen f3. The idea was just to develop his light squared bishop and castle shot, life goes on. But guess what Caruana did here? He castle shot, completely forgetting that his knight on a6 is hanging, because after bishop takes on a6, the b7 pawn is pinned to the rook on a8, which is undefended. And so, right in this position, after bishop takes a6, Caruana resigned. The game just ended in 11 moves. And here you can see a whole super grandmaster hanging a piece in one move, which should at least give you some hope that they are also human beings, hence you are not the only one who blunders, so life should go on and continue being stress-free. Anyways, this is all for today's video, and don't forget to check out my website where you can purchase all my courses at very affordable prices with just 1 or 2 clicks. The link is in the description down below. Thank you so much, and I hope you liked this video. Until next time, bye bye.